Last week, Madam President, while most of the world was focused on our elections, myself included, and in the pending results, a very significant action was taking place halfway around the world in Western Sahara. Simply put, Morocco chose that time, likely purposely chose that time when everyone was occupied doing other things, to threaten to push back on protests by Western Saharans on their own land. There they are. These are the protesters. These are people that own the land, have been there for generations, and are protesting the problems that they have with Morocco trying to eject them from their land. It seems simple, but you have to remember how we got here. And while the status of the Sahraoui people is still in question, and what we need to do to create a lasting solution. So how we got here, as West Africa was being decolonized, Western Sahara was clear and declared itself an independent nation a long time ago. That was despite Morocco's attempt to claim it as a territory. In 1966, the United Nations General Assembly resolution agreed that a referendum of self-determination should be held. That's a referendum of self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. And everyone agreed that and planned to hold that on 1975. Self-determination, merely letting the Sahrawi people decide for themselves the imperative principle of action, the right to judge for themselves to be independent or to be a part of Morocco. This was just the first promise of a referendum. That was 1975. To date, none have been kept, and International Court of Justice opinion from 1975 also agreed that Morocco did not have sovereignty over the land and that a referendum of self-determination should be held. Everyone agreed. And that was the second promise. Morocco maintained its unlawful claim to their land, and after decolonization, attempted to annex the territory with force. That was actually in 1975. Western Sahara, officially called the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, through the Polisario, defended their rights to land. Now we're talking about this area right here. The Morocco's up to the north in the Western Sahara, the independent Western Sahara land that Morocco is trying to claim as their own is to the south of that. And so they called for after a decade of violence from Morocco, the United Nations finally came in 1991, and both sides agreed to a ceasefire and a path forward. Everyone agreed. It was called the settlement plan. It solidified that Morocco and Western Sahara agreed to hold a referendum and create a United Nations mission for the referendum in Western Sahara. That was called MINURSO. For those keeping track, that was the third promise. And it's worth noting that the United Nations regularly reaffirms the 1991 commitment to a referendum for self-determination. This is something that happens on a regular basis. The planned referendum in 1992 never took place, and the process stalled through a ceasefire that was held. Morocco just wouldn't hold up its end of the bargain. Now, former Secretary of State James Baker, it's kind of interesting because back in 1997, he tried to do this again. I remember talking to him, this has been several years ago now, about 15 years ago, saying that sometime we have to get this problem resolved. It's been hanging out there for generations and decades. And he said, well, good luck. We've tried everything we could do. Back at that time, he was Secretary of State under President Bush. And he named a special envoy to Western Sahara. Baker worked the multiple plans with Morocco and Western Sahara. He thought he could get it done. That was it. He was a special envoy way back in 1992. Former Secretary of State tried again in 1997. He named a special envoy to Western Sahara. Baker worked multiple plans with Morocco and Western Sahara again. And most noticeable, the Houston Agreement. Now, the Houston Agreement was signed by Morocco and Western Sahara and recommitted to the referendum of self-determination planned for 1998. Keep track, that's the fourth time that was promised. And that was promised also by Morocco. Morocco, recognizing that they would likely lose the vote, quickly tanked all the negotiations the next year by declaring that they would never accept a referendum that included independence as an outcome despite years of promises. It's been called a frozen conflict where no outcome exists, yet there is no perceived active conflict. It makes it easy for the rest of the world to forget about it. But to call this a frozen conflict makes it seem harmless when in reality, it's anything but that. Tens of thousands of Sahrawi people live in refugee camps, primarily in Tindorf, Algeria. They have been forced from their homes, waiting for a resolution for decades. Allowing this process to stall has cost them a generation of freedom. It's been to those camps many times. I've been there, I've seen it, I've talked to the people, and we're talking about these people here, the ones that are protesting. That's where we have been and talked to the individuals, and they don't give up. They continue generation after generation with the hope that they would get their land back. Beyond denying the Sahrawi people the right to freedom and self-determination, the government of Morocco is trying to steal and pillage as much as possible from the land that they have unlawfully claimed. They are stealing their natural resources, unlawfully mining and selling valuable critical minerals, specifically phosphate. They are illegally fishing in the Western Sahara's waters. And what does Morocco do with these riches? They pay millions of dollars each year to lobbyists in Washington. Their goal to convince the world that they are innocent and demonize the Sahrawi people. Now, Moroccans believe that they can wait out the rest of the world. They want us to forget about the human rights of these people in this picture that are peacefully protesting today, right now, as we're speaking on the floor. They know a frozen conflict benefits them and hurts the cause of independence. They know that they can push the boundaries of what is acceptable. And that's how we got to this point. And that's why we're here at this point now. Where just a few weeks ago, while the people of Western Sahara were peacefully protesting in Gujarat, that's the region. The Gujarat region is down there. It's not even close to Morocco. It's down to the south end of Western Sahara, and it actually comes into Mauritania from down there. So that's the area that has the red square around it, and that's what we are talking about. That's where they are now. That's where these people are right now. But Morocco has repeatedly attempted to use a road in this region for transport the goods in violation of the UN ceasefire agreement. Let's keep in mind, it's the United Nations ceasefire agreement. They're the ones who are supposed to be promoting not just protecting a ceasefire on both sides, but promoting a referendum. It was this illegal use of the territory that Western Saharans were peacefully protesting. Rather than recognizing their rights to protest, Morocco has once again raised a call to arms and is threatening to crush these legitimate protesters. In fact, I heard just the other day, 3 days ago, that they have some 200 trucks coming down from Morocco down to Gujarat, that area down there where the peaceful protests are taking place. And rather than recognize the right to protest, Morocco has once again raised a call to arms and is threatening to crush these protests that are going on. King Mohammed of Morocco has just said this past weekend, and this is a quote, he says, Morocco will not waver in its position. That's in spite of what all the agreements that have taken place, including the United Nations. We're also hearing concern reports that he's sending military forces to the region as well as in a clear escalation. And this isn't a new problem. Morocco has been trying to illegally use the Gujarat issue for a long period of time. That's the bridge that goes across from Western Sahara to Mauritania. And so the problem has been there for a long period of time. And it's a concern for a couple of reasons. First, it's simple. Morocco is escalating this situation again to claim more and more land, resources, and rights that they have no law behind them to claim. And they know it. They're fully aware of this. In 2017, the United States was encouraging the United Nations to send a technical team to Gujarat. Western Sahara welcomed this. Morocco blocked it because they didn't want to be exposed. The second is that no one around the world is raising the cause for alarm. Where is the United Nations now? They're charged with enforcing the 1991 ceasefire agreement, yet they are nowhere to be found. And they have been very silent, tolerating Morocco's abuse for years and Morocco's violations of the UN orders. And that's why the time is now to move from this frozen conflict and force Morocco to live up to their agreement for nearly 30 years and hold a referendum. Not in a year and not in 3 years. They're always talking about what they're going to do out in the future. But now is the time that we can do that. We need to take steps to hold the referendum for self-determination now. Morocco is escalating, and left unchecked, they are going to keep their escalation going. The result would be inevitable. We would risk to turning back the times of open conflict. The UN needs to step up now and enforce their agreement, and the world needs to prove we all stand for our values of freedom and democracy by extending those values to the Sahrawis. They have waited too long. And you know, everyone's for this agreement. Everyone is. I mean, we have the African Union that comprises some 55 member states. They're strongly in support of this independence for the Sahrawis. We have most of the European community who support the United Nations efforts. The European Court of Justice also ruled that Western Sahara is not a part of Morocco and that no EU economic agreements can cover Western Sahara. In 2004, the United States and Morocco had a free trade agreement where they did reaffirm, and that's the United States reaffirming the independence of Western Sahara. So that's what's happening right now. The rest of the world is on our side in this issue. So who does Morocco have? They have paid lobbyists. Some of the lobbyists Morocco has employed: JPC Strategies, Third Circle, Neil Creek, averaging over $1 million each year. Now, total, they've had some 10 lobbyists since 2016, and they've actually put in $11 million. $11 million in the Sahara, in Western Sahara. They have nothing. They have no resources. And so they're the giant with all of their lobbyists. I made it clear earlier when I testified, and by the way, I did something I don't think has been done before or since then. As a member of the United States Senate, I testified at a House hearing that they had on this issue way back 15 years ago. And this is stalled because there's just no money on our side. Morocco has it all. So here's what we need to do. The time is right. We've waited long enough. While we work to schedule a referendum, we need the United Nations to send a team to the Gujarat in that area and confirm that Morocco is in violation of the agreement. Everyone knows they're in violation of the agreement. The agreement is very specific. It says that they are there to enforce this, the United Nations. Then this is the key part. They need to enforce the 1991 ceasefire agreement. This will restore good faith with all parties that can then make real progress to reaching a referendum of self-determination. This is the time, the reason we're concerned today is because we know that Morocco right now are sending military equipment down to the area, some 200 trucks full of equipment. And this is, that's why this time is right and it's going to happen. Now, here they are. These are the people we're talking about. These are the people who are peacefully protesting to keep and use the land that is there and has been there and that the whole world knows is theirs. So they're the victims. They deserve a referendum for self-determination, and the UN is going to have to make this happen. I don't know of any other way that this can happen. First of all, they've agreed to it, and the UN is a party that can put that together. So we're calling on them now to go ahead and do what they have agreed to do and end this, this conflict that has endured generation after generation. With that, I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.